This is the
Five Starr
Podcast.
Let me talk to you. Hi. What do you guys want to talk about? This is such good shit. Thanks, guys. Back to you.
Well then, that was a thing that happened. Took, 2 hours, 49 minutes, and however many seconds to get there. But by golly, they got it right. WWE, in the year 2023, managed to get a real, genuine, authentic surprise reaction out of the crowd. Didn't even know that was possible anymore. In an era where it's borderline impossible to hide or conceal anything wrestling related. They kept this bad boy under wraps. And you know what? Credit to them for not letting the news get out. That was a real wrestling moment. Applause is in order. Well done. And of course, I'm obviously talking about the one thing that people are bustling about coming out of Survivor Series over the weekend. The big shocking news bulletin that broke the internet on Saturday night in more ways than one. You all know what I'm talking about. That's right. Talking about Io Sky and that death-defying leap off the top of the cage underneath the gimmick trash can. Oh, wait a sec. No, that was just idiotic and stupid. Oh, silly me. Well, there was that other thing that happened too. But maybe I'll save that discussion. I want to build up to it, in dramatic fashion. Just like WWE did with that Survivor Series show, where they dramatically dragged me through the mud for almost 3 hours just to get to the one big moment at the very end. I didn't know whether or not I wanted to flip them the bird or give them a giant hug. Or both. I definitely didn't want to drink their fluids. That's sort of Hangman Page's gimmick now, I guess. He's now the new Jon Moxley in AEW, where he drinks the bones and eats the blood and devours the liver of his opponents on pay-per-view. And you know what's funny? He still won't amount to anything in the wrestling business in the next 10 to 15 years. What a goof. It was definitely a palate cleanser that we got over the weekend, though. After all the controversy surrounding AEW's Bloodbath event the previous weekend, WWE turned around and said, let's try to create some positive PR. Now, it's not to say everything on that show was sunshine and rainbows, because, I'm actually going to jump into the card now and talk about what they presented on that show over the weekend. Because, they did have some wrestling matches kind of taking up space. Allegedly. Spoiler, most of them weren't good. Nah, I'm just kidding. No, it was not a terrible show. It was a WWE show. What more can you say about it? But that's not all we have in store for today. Because in addition to the Survivor Series 2023 event, we also have another Survivor Series pay-per-view we're going to recap. As we're continuing along in our Retro Series archives on the channel, we have WWF Survivor Series 1994 that we're going to discuss. A show that left me even more disgusted and fuming than the Wargames themed pay-per-view I just watched on Saturday night. Oh yeah, we're coming in hot this week, folks. We just got a boatload of stuff we're going to talk about on the FSWR channel today. So you know what? Screw the intros. Screw the small talk. You know what to do. Subscribe, comment, like. Or on YouTube and Rumble every Monday and Friday for a new podcast episode. This one's going to be special, though. I can already tell. My passion is soaring through the roof on this one. Can you feel the energy in the room, man? I can certainly smell something in the room right now. I don't know what that is. It smells like rotting flesh. Something going on with my heater again? I don't know. Well, if the room starts going up in flames, that'll at least answer my question. Unless the neighbors are burning firewood again. They tend to do that stuff this time of year. Hopefully we'll make it through this one unscathed. I mean, to be honest, I was kind of conflicted with where I even wanted to start with the reviews today. Since the recent Survivor Series show is on my mind, may as well just go ahead and start with that. Hopefully it won't take long to get through the actual card. I mean, up until the last 5 minutes, literally right before the cameras turned off, I was contemplating whether or not I even wanted to do a full review. But they managed to save it by the end. Well, let's go ahead and quickly barrel through the first 45 minutes, because they opened with the Women's Wargames match, which was perfect for me because I still hadn't had dinner yet. So that gave me a chance to take my time prepping my meal and doing the occasional TV glance to see what horrors were perpetrating my monitor. Because seriously, are you fucking kidding me? Did you actually think I was going to watch this thing? What planet are you living on? What's my running joke been with the SmackDown reports? The next time I see a good women's Wargames match in WWE, it'll be the first. And after this was over with, I can confidently say, still waiting with bated breath. God. I mean, it was exactly what I knew it would be. Did I not fucking predict it would just turn into another garbage plunder match? How long did it take before they even introduced the first weapon? 5 minutes? Could call it in my sleep, bro. Doesn't require that much forethought. It's the same stupid shit they do every year with these matches. Of course, all the marks in the crowd are retards, so they just wind up chanting for tables instead of actually caring about anything going on in the ring. They don't give a fuck about the story or the drama of Wargames. They don't care about the babyfaces having to overcome adversity and triumphing over the unbeatable odds. They just want to see table spots. Because they're ECW marks. They beat off to this kind of bullshit. Not that WWE did anyone a service with telling a compelling story here. Christ, they couldn't even figure out the stupidity of giving the babyfaces the fucking team advantage. Pea brains. Well, I guess now would be a good time to even mention who was part of this fiasco. It is Damage Control, which consisted of Bayley, Io Sky, Kairi Sane, and Asuka, versus the team of whoever was captaining the babyfaces. I don't even know. It was Bianca, Becky, Charlotte, and Botchzy. You knew there had to be an odd man out somewhere. Or an odd girl out. Because as we all know, Hunter apparently has a peculiar infatuation with this weirdo-looking Shotzi chick. I don't know what it is, dude. But ever since they canned Vince from having any creative input with this company, and they basically made Hunter the guy overseeing everything on the creative team, here's Shotzi popping up all of a sudden, getting pushed with all the main eventers on television again. Yeah, you go figure that one out. I mean, honestly, though, in comparison to most of the garbage I saw in this match, Shotzi was the least of the problems. I alluded to it earlier, but I mean, everyone's probably going to be talking about the EO spot where she dived off the top of the cage with a trash can over her head. I can already see Travis Heckel drawing the cartoon artwork for Jim Cornette's YouTube podcast. That'll be front and center on the video. It was fucking dumb. I don't care how many people pop for it. It was unnecessarily dangerous. Could have easily gone wrong in so many ways. All for a random spot in the match that didn't even factor into the fucking finish. Granted, it wasn't as stupid as Charlotte doing the moonsault onto the pile of bodies and concussing Io with her boot. Because she's a reckless piece of shit and always has been. I don't know what else there is to say about it. The booking was beyond stupid. It was every modern garbage match you've ever seen in the last 20 years. I mean, the whole summation is a bunch of girls hit each other with gimmicks and bumped around for an eternity. Some people probably thought it was hot. I don't know why. I find it incredibly disturbing and off-putting. And I don't like seeing women do this kind of shit to their bodies. It just devolved into exactly what every contemporary Wargames match turns into. Not just exclusive to WWE, because AEW's guilty of the same bullshit. I mean, their blood and guts themed cage matches basically turn out the same way. Just endless use of weapons and outlaw spots that generate nothing but cheap pops. Because they're appealing to the lowest common denominator when they do these kinds of matches. It was trash. You don't like it? TS. I vote a boycott for all future Wargames matches. I'm fed up with them. I've now officially turned on Wargames. Just like I've turned on the no DQ, street fight, anything goes matches. Just like I've turned on the 3-ways and the 4-ways and all the other multi-person clusterfucks. I'm so sick of the same old tired format with these matches. It's lazy booking. It's not what the original concept of Wargames was supposed to be. It's WWE putting their own spin on what used to be a very hot promotional seller for house shows and live events back in the day. When Dusty originally thought up the concept back in 1987. Now they've just taken that same concept and neutered it. Just a carbon copy of the same thing every year. They don't even try to dress it up differently anymore. So fuck everything about this match. And the people associated with it. And now that I'm all fired up and ready to go, we can talk about WWE Survivor Series proper. We'll just ignore everything about the first hour and go to this Gunther versus Miz IC title match, where I officially started watching the event. The moment we are about to find out the unthinkable, can Miz do it? Can he believably grapple with Gunther? Was he capable of showing he is a competent pro wrestler? Well, the short answer is no. He still sucks. But he tried. I mean, all joking aside, here's the bottom line. And you can pretty much call this a running theme for all the matches that were sandwiched into the middle of the show, what you would consider the undercard matches. You look at this match, you look at the Escobar match, you look at the other women's title match that took place later on in the semi-main. Did any of these matches belong in a premium live event? Or any of those matches pay-per-view quality? No. So there's two different ways to judge a match like this. You can either say it was a serviceable to good TV match that they shoehorned onto a pay-per-view card because they needed to fill time. Or you can say they needed to have a better opponent lined up for Gunther. Because let's be honest, Miz ain't cutting the mustard as a quality pay-per-view opponent. I know some people like him, but let's be real here. Because either way, you get the same result. The result being, this match belonged on television, and not even in the main event. Now, with that said, it was probably the best Miz match I've ever seen. I mean, probably since what, the Bryan Danielson feud? By that same token, it was probably one of the weaker Gunther matches I've seen in quite some time. Partially because of the dance partner. I mean, Miz ain't giving him a whole lot to work with. I mean, I thought they did all right. Not for a split second did I actually think Miz was winning this match. But they had the people there with a couple of the underhanded Miz tactics. Not really sure what to make of the psychology of Miz the babyface having to revert to cheating tactics to try to beat the heel. Like pulling off the turnbuckle pad, going low on Gunther during the ref distraction. The Miz is not Eddie Guerrero. He can't pull that shit off like Eddie used to do back in the day. He doesn't have that kind of charm. But the basic story here was Gunther beat the piss out of him forever. Miz tried to go to the heel purse and pull out a couple of his old tricks to catch Gunther off guard. But at the end of the day, he got thwarted. Gunther just kicked out of all of Miz's pin attempts and then tapped him out clean with a Boston Crab. So thanks for coming, Miz. Again, I remind you, Gunther was the heel in this case. Just let that sink in for a minute. Kind of just another day at the office for Gunther, I guess. I really am interested to see how much longer they prolong that title reign, because I've got to imagine with Rumble and Mania season coming up, they've got to have some young, hungry lions waiting in the wings to challenge Gunther, right? He can't hold on to that belt forever. Hey, you know who I would go with? Braun Breaker. Just throwing it out there. So then we had Dragon Lee versus Santos Escobar, which, did they change this on the Go Home show? Wasn't it supposed to be Escobar and Carlito? What happened to that? Did Carlito just decide he didn't want to do a job? Now, that's the kind of shit I like to see, brother. Carlito getting that gospel advice from the book of Hulk Hogan. But hey, good for Dragon Lee, I guess. He gets a pay-per-view payout for it. You know what? Let me just say this before I even bother critiquing any of the match. Santos Escobar as a heel, far and away better than him as a babyface. He is so much more natural in this role. Especially when he's in there working with a guy like Dragon Lee, who does all the flashy Lucha offense that all the people take to. But I even see it in the facials, man. Like when he's tearing at the mask and trash-talking Dragon Lee. Escobar just seems so much more at home as a heel. That babyface run was just not doing him any favors. So I'm glad they course-corrected and decided to go with the heel turn, even if the execution left a lot to be desired. I won't call this a great match, but it was pretty good. Going back to my discussion of the previous match, if they booked this on a SmackDown, I would probably give it higher praise. Do it as a top-of-the-hour match, give it time, have them do virtually the same match they did here. I think the problem here, too, was that they pretty much just served up Dragon Lee on a silver platter to Santos. I think that's what a lot of us were expecting to happen with Carlito had he actually been cleared to compete here. They gave Dragon Lee a couple hope spots to keep it mildly interesting. The finish came out of nowhere, though. I don't know if I really like the setup for that. They're kind of going back and forth at the end. There's a spot where Escobar hits Dragon Lee with a really sick-looking super kick. I think it was when Lee was charging at Escobar from the corner. Looks sweet. And then they're just kind of trading stuff back and forth for another minute. Somewhere in there, Lee hits a Liger bomb or some kind of sit-out power bomb for a near fall. And then pretty much out of nowhere, Escobar just cuts him off with a Canadian Destroyer and then a Fireman's Carry Slam for the 3 count. It's like, where the hell did that come from? That really wasn't built up to all that well. But we'll see where they go with this Escobar heel push. They made the right call by putting him over here. If the end goal is to do the match with him and Rey next year, they are going to need to protect Escobar as much as possible. We'll see how much patience they actually have. Is Rey going to be cleared by WrestleMania? Ugh. I don't know. They better have a plan B in store. So then we had Rhea Ripley and Zoe Stark for one of the alleged women's world titles. I don't even know which one. The one Rhea currently has. So the more important one. And, yeesh. Yeah. This match. Not good. Not good at all. I'm a big proponent of Rhea. I've had some good things to say about Zoe in the past. Some was off here. That old cliche, the chemistry didn't click. It was quite relevant in this conversation. For one, the ring psychology was completely ass backwards because the people were way too pro-Rhea here. So during the moments where Rhea was in control, most of the fans were just kind of sitting on their hands because no one wanted to rally behind Zoe to make a comeback. The other problem, too, more plainly, it was just a bad match. Zoe looked out of place for a lot of the key spots. I don't know if you chalked it up to nerves, but she and Rhea were just kind of fumbling around in certain spots. Again, the crowd just didn't really care about anything Zoe did offensively. She tried to fire up there at the end and attempt to show some emotion on camera. But that only gets you so far when the crowd's completely apathetic about anything you're doing. It actually kind of makes things more awkward. Because then you're just kind of grasping at straws. Rhea still looks like $1 million, though. It's going to be a damn shame when WWE loses her to Hollywood in about 5 years. I haven't been following a lot of the stuff she's been doing on Raw, but man, every time she comes out here for these PLEs, she's got a super unique look to her outfits. Well, everything about her is unique. The hair's always done differently. She's always got the cool makeup patterns, the gear. I mean, she definitely goes above and beyond to present herself like a big star. So good on her, man. She is going to be a fucking mainstream attraction before you know it. I think a lot of people have been calling that for a long time. I've been calling it since I saw her in NXT years ago. She's got the look. She's got the it factor. And as long as she doesn't get swept up into the Hollywood drama and just focuses on her career, and she doesn't get political or hang out with the wrong crew, she's got a bright future ahead of her. Again, though, just really not a whole lot to say about the match. Rhea retains. That's not a shocker to anybody. And unfortunately, unlike the two previous matches, I can't even really say this would suffice as a good TV match. I mean, no offense to the girls, but it wasn't a good match. It was the buffer segment before the men's Wargames. That death slot on the card that people so often talk about. It's pretty much the treatment these girls got. But let's stop tiptoeing around the tulips here. Let's just talk about the only thing that mattered on this entire show. The main event. And everything surrounding it. They were working up the story throughout the show to keep everybody on their toes. What's the status of Randy Orton? Would he show up and be a part of the babyface team? He was advertised for the event, but they were chalking it up to car troubles as to why he wasn't at the arena before the start of the match. So, no, at least they were attempting to tell a compelling story. And it did actually leave the people guessing in a lot of ways. Because all throughout the show, thinking that Randy might not be there, there was that seed of doubt planted. And that left everybody in the arena to start the chant for the other guy. And we'll talk about him at the very end. It's funny how they were able to get the psychology of Wargames correct for this match by painting the baby faces at the man disadvantage. Meanwhile, for the entire length of the girls' Wargames, I'm having to sit there and watch the villains fight from underneath while the protagonist had the clear-cut advantage. God. Is it really that fucking hard? Oh yeah, and I guess I should mention this too, since we don't watch Raw. Drew McIntyre's a heel now. Not necessarily affiliated with the Judgment Day. He's sort of a lone wolf kind of bad guy now. But apparently he's been beefing with Jey Uso over some stuff. He also doesn't seem entirely on board with the Judgment Day, but, what's that old saying? You go along to get along. It's that kind of working relationship. So anyway, it's the Judgment Day plus Drew versus Team Cody, which is Cody Rhodes, Sami Zayn, Jey Uso, Seth Prance, and Rollins. And hopefully Randy Orton, if AAA can somehow hitch him a ride to the arena. Of course, the entrances take about 70 years to get through. So that's when Michael Cole has to break out his factoids. It was so weird hearing him reference the Shield like 5,000 times on this show. He does realize that 1/3 of those guys works for the competition, right? Is that some kind of hidden message? Are we being led to believe that the oil mechanic might be having second thoughts? Oh, God. One can only hope that's not the case. Now, of course, there's so much detail to break down in these kinds of matches. I'm not going to bore you to death. I'm going to sort of cherry pick the important parts. Try not to get hung up on the things that bothered me. Most notably, the fucking gimmicks. God damn. Wasn't already overkill that the girls were doing it 2 hours prior. Now the guys are essentially doing the same exact thing. It's like clockwork. Every single time someone comes out from the shark cage to join the match, what's the first thing they have to do? Do they run into the ring to save their partners? Nope. They have to go under the ring and grab a weapon. Why? Seriously, why? Does it make any sense? No. Of course it doesn't. You know why they do it? Cheap pops. But I already mentioned that. My God, you'd think at some point in the night one of the peons would put two and two together and just run down to the ring to collect all the weapons and then hide them somewhere else. God forbid we keep the plunder out of the ring. But that would be too easy. Again, it's the same bullshit that just happened with the girls. Pulling out chains, chairs, kendo sticks, trash cans. Pretty much every weapon except tables. So if they pulled out something other than a table, they got booed. Didn't matter if they were a face or a heel. Yeah, there were three things that got massive pops on this show. Randy Orton, the other guy that I keep referencing, we'll talk about him in a minute, and tables. Again, though, they were smart enough to at least have the heels gain the team advantage. So that at least made for a better overall story during the Wargames portion, before the match beyond. I mean, it's all pretty mild action, even with the use of the gimmicks early on. Of course, the moment Sammy introduced the table, that's when the people all blew a gasket. Both for Sammy and the table. So I guess that's four things people pop for all night. Three of them were wrestlers. The other was a piece of Home Depot furniture. Sidetrack for a minute here. The story of Sami Zayn in WWE is something people ought to write a book about. It's timely, so I'll bring it up here. We're going back and watching a lot of these old NXT shows from like a decade ago. If you really think about it for a minute, it is amazing to think about the longevity this guy's gotten out of his WWE run. These people have never strayed from their loyalty to this guy. He is just as over now as he was back in 2013. If not more. Seriously, how many wrestlers in WWE, say in the last, 15 to 20 years, can you say have that built-in reputation of staying over with the crowd, no matter how well or poorly they were booked? They're few and far between. Bryan Danielson might be the other one. Even guys like Randy Orton or John Cena or Edge, like those guys even went through phases where the crowd was kind of lukewarm or despondent with their runs. They weren't always popular. God, especially Orton and Cena. You want some real revisionist history, go back and look at the way those guys were getting booed out of the building like a decade ago. Not Sammy, though. That guy's been a white meat fan favorite babyface through and through. And then likewise, you get a guy like Dom. And that's a kid that'll find the cure for cancer and the people will still boo him out of the fucking building. He'll go into the WWE Hall of Fame in the year 2080 and the people will boo him during the ceremony. So awesome. It is funny, I think they actually missed a golden opportunity when Dom was the last heel to join the match. Could you imagine how electric that pop would have been in the room if Dom was running down to the ring And then from literally out of the void, Randy Orton just flies in from out of nowhere and RKOs him. That would have been WWE's highlight of 2023. And here's what I'll say about the men's Wargames match. Up until the actual match beyond portion, when everyone's in the ring and the match officially begins, honestly, I know there were some names in there, but I was bored shitless, dude. I really was. I mean, the weapon stuff automatically turns me off. But I'll say this. Once everybody got in there, and you still had the suspension of what's going on with Randy, I think that's where everyone kind of woke up and started getting a little more into it. Because then you get the clock down for the final babyface on Team Cody, and there's the dramatic pause as everybody's waiting for Randy's music to hit. But of course, his music doesn't hit. It's actually Rhea Ripley's music. And I thought this was actually a pretty clever little swerve here, because she comes barreling down the rampway with Damien's briefcase. She's about to have Jessica Carr cash in the Money in the Bank contract, which makes perfect sense because Seth Rollins is right there in the ring, surrounded by a cage. The heels already technically have the numbers advantage. All they have to do is restrain the other baby faces, and Seth is fucked. But right before she can hand the briefcase over, bam, that's when they cue Randy's music. And boy, I'll tell you, man, I've never been a Randy Orton fan. I couldn't stand the way this company used to try to force feed this guy down my throat as a main eventer for the last 15 to 20 years. Especially when they tried it with him as a babyface. Good God. It was insufferable. I always thought the guy was extremely overrated. And there was like that one brief window in the mid-2000s where I think he was feuding with The Undertaker. That's probably like the last time I actually gave a shit about anything Randy Orton was involved with from a story standpoint. And we're going back like, what, 2004, 2005, 2006 when all that was going down. So it's been a hot minute since I've had anything good to say about Randall Keith Orton in WWE. But when that Viper music hit, and Randy comes out to that pop, like you could even see the look on his face. That guy was stoked to be back. He looked like he was having the time of his life out there. He gets down the ring and starts running roughshod over the heels, tossing everyone around, DDTing everybody in sight, RKOs galore. I mean, the crowd's popping for everything the guy does. The spot with all the baby faces doing the draping DDTs to the heels to the middle rope, that was kind of cool looking. I like the little nod to the history with Jey Uso where Orton looked like he was about to pull the trigger and turn on him after having been put out of action. I mean, I think that's how Orton was written off of TV and storyline, correct? Right before he went away. But instead, Jey actually saves Orton from getting blindsided by super kicking Damian Priest. And then they do the really cool babyface flurry where everybody gets to hit their finishers in succession on the various heels. Again, crowd's just erupting for everything going on at this point. And then we get the whole thing where, what's a little weasel's face? I can never remember his name. Is it JD McDonald? JD McDonut? Whatever his fucking name is. Well, he tries to climb out over the cage, but Sammy and Seth chase after him and stop him. And, well, then they set up the spot where they toss him off the top of the cage, and then Randy can hit him with an RKO. Looked a little raw in execution, but still got a big reaction. I mean, in real time, you could tell they totally fucked the spot up. But that set up the nice little homage to him and Cody, their history together. So Randy let Cody hit Dom with the crossroads and secure the 3 count. Babyfaces win. No heel swerves with Randy. It's one of those heartwarming welcome back moments where the babyfaces are all happy to reunite with Randy, except Matt Riddle. Oh, I didn't even mention this too. Orton was in great shape. That's probably the best he's looked physically in the last 5 or 6 years. You could tell he's been hitting the gym hard. And even if by and large, the match itself was kind of discount the last 5 to 10 minutes, the Randy Orton return was very well done. Again, regardless of what I think of him, can't take away from the fact that the guy's a big household name. The fans respect him. They were craving to see the comeback. And the return didn't disappoint. Makes you wonder what they have in store for him come Rumble season. And Mania season, for that matter. You know, especially with the way the show ended. The more and more I see a lot of these big names popping up from out of the woodwork, the more I'm thinking they ought to strongly consider calling an audible with the Roman and Cody match. But, well, I'll say this. I was like a split moment away from shutting off the show right there, where you had all the baby faces in the ring together, and they're, doing their celebratory thing. There was that small voice in my head that said, hold on for a brief sec, Tommy. Don't jump the gun. My instincts are kicking in here. And as they pan the wide shot out and they show the crowd, they got the big LED display board right in the main camera frame. Static Scratch. Living color. Cult of personality. Graphics and all. It's fucking CM Punk. And I'm not going to steal Corny's gimmick. I promised myself I wouldn't. I'll let him do his rancid rendition of Mussolini. But fucking hell. What a moment. Just when I thought, man, that Randy Orton pop was truly something special. You don't see too many standing ovations like that anymore. And then CM Punk swoops in and says, hold my beer, brother. And, yeah, wow. There's a lot to say about that. Where do you even start? Without immediately reverting the conversation back to AEW and talking about more Tony Khan missed opportunities. I mean, without getting too deep in the weeds with all that, I'll say this, just to keep the discussion surface level. It does change the dynamic of the whole AEW versus WWE discussion. AEW may have Adam Copeland now, but when WWE turns around and says, up yours, Tony, we got fucking Punk back. Yeah. That's a game changer. And I don't think anybody should look past that. Whether you're a Punk lover or a Punk hater, business picks up from this point now. And again, I'm not going to sit here and go into the whole Punk AEW discussion. I've talked about all that before. It was never going to work. It was always the wrong fit. We all knew it was only a matter of time before Punk would butt heads with the EVPs. He was always going to be swimming upstream there. Everybody knew it. Okay? Let's just call it like it is. WWE has been, and will always be a much better fit for Punk. It's a more controlled environment. I think the talent pool is better for the kind of worker Punk is. He's going to have much better chemistry with his opponents. I know there are still some people in that company that have strong opinions of Punk. Some that may not be excited about the idea of him being there again. Anybody out there that's already claiming the doomsday discussion, that it's only a matter of time before Brawl Out Part 3 or whatever. This is not a Tony Khan clown show operation. There are too many corporate figures and upper management that'll put a stop to any backstage drama before it ever gets out in the public sphere. And you can bank on that. I don't want to get hung up on that discussion. I want to focus on the opportunities that lie ahead. Because if this is for real, and it's not just a one-night dick tease of, oh, they're in Chicago, so here's a Punk cameo, and now you're never going to see him again. If they got Punk locked down for a new contract term, for however long it may run, I don't know if it's a multi-year deal or what the scenario is, but they're going to need to get the most mileage out of him while they can. Because the guy's what now, 44, 45 years old? We know about the injury history in AEW. We know the guy probably only has maybe a couple peak years left before his body shuts down on him entirely. WWE talent works a completely different style than the AEW talent do. So Punk's not going to have to kill himself night after night just to get a reaction out of the people. He's going to work smart. He's going to do business with the people he wants to do business with. Whatever previous history he may have had with Hunter, hopefully they patched up those differences and have decided to work professionally together again. Here's the thing you have to keep in mind, too. Whether or not there's any inbuilt animosity in that company still, there are probably people that are employed with WWE today that Punk worked with over a decade ago. He may not be very fond of them on a personal level. That doesn't mean they have to like each other to work together. If he and Hunter can remain cordial, I think there's a working relationship there that can generate some positive publicity for the company. How much say Hunter had in Punk's return versus, say, Nick Khan's influence? That remains up in the air. But this is a chance for Punk to just get the stench of AEW off of his shoulders, start fresh, and more importantly, bring his career to closure on his terms. However many matches he wants to do, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 10, 20, it's Punk's chance to go out in the place where he rose to prominence. Whatever bad feelings or previous issues he had with other management, that's all but in the past. It's behind them. Vince is out of the picture. Creatively, I think we're at the stage now where Punk will at least have a good amount of say in the people he works with. You know, whatever the plans are for Mania. I mean, I don't really know if I want to get into fantasy booking now, but things are definitely looking a lot more promising for WrestleMania 40. Because now they have options. With top guys, too. As much as I would like to see them stick to their guns and finish the story with Cody and Roman, throwing CM Punk into the equation really leaves some open-ended dialogue. Because now all of a sudden, you can make the argument that Punk versus Roman for the title on paper, it might have more story implication than Cody and Roman. And I don't think programming Punk and Rollins for the Bronze Tier Raw title is going to be a valuable option for them. I think an LA Knight would be better served for that spot. If they don't want to go through with the match with him and Logan Paul, which hopefully is still on the table. I don't even know. Again, if I really wanted to spend time breaking this all down methodically, I could try and construct a reasonable dream card without just spitballing ideas off the top of my head. But, man, even a heel Randy Orton versus a babyface Cody Rhodes in a grudge match, that would be a valuable asset to the WrestleMania 40 card. If they're having second thoughts and figure, we need to go in a different direction. You know, because with that, the whole Randy Orton, Cody Rhodes thing, you have the whole legacy background, the previous story history between them. Again, I'm not suggesting they immediately deviate from the original plans just because they got Orton and Punk back. But the solution's not as clear-cut as it once was. That's all I'm saying. But no matter where Punk ends up, whether it's Raw or SmackDown, if he's going to be a free agent for the time being. I can tell you this much. WWE television just became must-see again. Because now you don't know what the hell's going to happen. It all makes up for the fact that Roman is still MIA for the time being. But this is the kind of buzz WWE needs to create for itself going into Rumble season in January. Traditionally, it's the time of year where they begin to pick up a little bit of steam. There's a lot of speculation on what the Rumble plans might be, who ought to win, that whole thing. And again, Punk, Orton, Rhodes, McIntyre, Rollins, LA Knight, a returning Reigns, possibly a returning Cena sometime in early 2024. Like, WWE's really got the chance to make WrestleMania 40 a major spectacular. That's the kind of event where I'd actually maybe argue for a 2-night card. Because with that level of talent at your fingertips, you could easily do a 13 or 14 match card. You know, just break it up into 2 nights because you don't want to burn the people out in one sitting. If you are going to stick to the game plan and do the Cody and Roman match on night 2, or Cody wins the title and then wraps up the dealings with the Bloodline, maybe you can do Punk and somebody else on night 1. Punk's always said that his one regret in WWE was never getting the chance to headline WrestleMania. You know that's got to be built into the contract somehow. WrestleMania 40. There's the time to do it. Whether or not it's for a title, I don't really know if Punk cares. I think he just wants the credential. Punk versus Owens would make sense. I know there's a little bit of professional animosity there that could lend itself to an interesting program. Punk versus Rollins, well, probably not my first option. That still is a big attraction match on paper. And again, there is some history there. I think Punk worked with the Shield, am I right? Maybe I'm misremembering that. I don't think there's much stock in a Punk versus Lesnar match at this point. They did that once before, and God, that was, 10 years ago? I don't think the dynamics would lend itself to a good match, especially with their age. Punk and Cena, that might have some nostalgic appeal. The problem, though, in that scenario is who do you cheer for? Him and Logan Paul, that'd be amusing. I wouldn't necessarily co-sign it, but I don't know. There could be some shoot fighting elements that play into that. That'd be an entertaining spectacle. Promos would be fucking outstanding. Oh, man, even him and LA Knight. Can you imagine that face-off? I don't know how the match would turn out, but fuck, the promos? Dude. Here's the thing. Even if I didn't think all that highly of the Survivor Series show, the ending is what has people talking. They have a great cliffhanger that they're suspending over everybody's head right now. And that, I think, counts for more than anything that actually took place on the card, match quality-wise. People can overlook that kind of stuff. But they have the people's attention now. And isn't that part of Punk's MO? Do I have your attention now? Well, fuck yeah, you do. And now we just wait and see how they follow through with it. Whatever the plans are in the lead up to WrestleMania next year. I mean, last year around this time, what was the hottest thing WWE had going? The Bloodline? Sami Zayn? All the inner workings surrounding that? And over the last 6 or 7 months, the Bloodline's been pretty cold. The stories died down. There's been some fluctuation in the key talent being presented in that group. Overall, it's lost a bit of steam. And they're going to try to pick that up again by introducing Cody back into the equation, but I don't know. I don't think it'll be on the same level as it was last year. I think people are kind of getting burnt out on the whole Bloodline run. They run the course with it. It's just kind of an old cycle at this point. They need some new ideas. But now the dynamics are different because they've got some ideas to play with. And if they stay on the ball and don't lose focus, it can be the same story headed into 2024. So right now, I'm cautiously optimistic. I know I should just learn to accept fate with WWE because I'm usually left disappointed about 95% of the time. But they always find a way to suck me back in and keep me guessing. Something they've always been able to do. Even if I know better, I should know not to get my hopes up, because I know I'm going to be disappointed by the end. But they always find a way to hook me in. Maybe someday I'll learn. Or maybe not. Oh boy, this thing. You know that's never a good sign. When we start a pay-per-view recap with this thing. Oh. It was indeed a thing that happened. Whether I want to speak about it again remains unclear. This might be the last. I don't know what gave me disturbing thoughts from the jump. The way the pay-per-view opened with showing all the teams talking strategy. In the case of Shawn, it was follow my lead because I'm good looking and sexy. In the case of Luger, it was remember team, there are certain things that money can't buy. And it's the spirit and the dedication to flourish. No, Luger. I'm pretty sure it's all about the money. If your motivation is, let's go out there and work hard for a completely meaningless multi-man tag match with nothing on the line, except bragging rights apparently, you are a tool. Plain and simple. Those were just a handful of things that already had me turning on this pay-per-view before it even started. That and seeing Vince in a cowboy outfit. There's a kink joke to be had somewhere in there. But I won't even go there. I mean, they were in San Antonio. Guess they needed a theme of some description. Ain't much happening in places like San Antonio, Texas, aside from cacti and dirt. Now, before we get into the granular detail of this pay-per-view, the good, the bad, the ugly, the appalling, I will say, and this is just a general take I had between watching this pay-per-view versus the Survivor Series show that WWE just held on the Peacock Network. It's an old cliche at this point, but I do really miss the old traditional Survivor Series tag matches. You know, when WWE did away with the annual elimination 5-on-5 tag matches, it just totally killed the gimmick of the pay-per-view. Yeah, there is an element to the survival theme when they do the Wargames every year. You know what the other problem is? It's not a WWE creation. The thing that was so special about the Survivor Series tag matches was that they were home to the WWF brand. Like seeing this old show versus the one I just watched on Saturday, two entirely different worlds. I mean, even if a lot of the show was garbage, a couple of the actual Survivor Series matches sucked a wet cock, at least it felt like Survivor Series. I just never got that same vibe with the Wargames stuff over the weekend. I mean, it's one of the few compliments I can actually give this pay-per-view. Because it ain't coming out of the first match on the card. The first of 3 Survivor Series elimination matches. What ultimately wound up being the better of the 3. Which really isn't saying a whole lot. It is the team of Razor Ramon, the British Bulldog, the 1-2-3 Kid, and the Head Shrinkers, better known as the Babyfaces, going up against Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Owen Hart, Jim Neidhart, and Slapnuts, a.k.a. Double J Jeff Jarrett. And of all theme songs for the heels to come out to, they don't pick Shawn's Sexy Boy theme. No, they go with the worst selection of the bunch, Diesel, whose music is literally just loud truck horns and engines revving. The heels all collectively agreed, hey, you know what would be really cool? If we came out to Diesel's music. A poor choice. And again, the story of the entire match, right from the onset, they established that Shawn was trying to one-up Diesel at every turn, hogging the spotlight all for himself. So when Diesel comes out leading the charge, there's Shawn to immediately jump in front of him in the aisleway and strike a pose. And you can even see Diesel rolling his eyes like, this fucking prick right here. So here's the first 2 minutes of the match. I'm not kidding. These were almost in back-to-back succession. Right as Owen and the Kid are about to tie up, they cut to the floor to show Fatu adjusting his left boot because it was giving him problems. A wardrobe malfunction of sorts. We are off to a wonderful start. And then less than a minute after that, they have the Anvil tag in. And in his first fucking spot, the first thing he does in this entire match, he whips the Kid off the ropes and he misses a left arm clothesline. And Waltman has to sell it anyway. And I don't mean like he grazed a clothesline. He outright missed. Like when a baseball player swings a bat and misses the ball. That was Jim Neidhart trying to execute this clothesline. A literal swing and a miss. He missed a clothesline due to depth perception. God, that guy was the shits. And you'll never guess, but he immediately tagged back out and went to stand on the apron again. He was better suited there. I mean, there were a couple little fun exchanges in the early goings. Most of them involving Owen. Bulldog and Neidhart were mercifully only in there for like a minute before Owen tagged in to save the incoming whores. And they end up building to the first elimination spot about 10 minutes in, where Fatu is squaring off with Owen. And after Owen blind tags Diesel, he's able to catch Fatu off guard and then plant him with a jackknife. So now the babyfaces are down one man in the early goings. I joked that now Fatu can go to the back and take his uncooperative boot off. And of course, fast forward a minute after that, you get Diesel taking out Waltman and the Barbarian with jackknives. You never saw too many men power up the Barbarian like that. Mad props to Nash for being able to hoist that guy up in the air. That is a lot of man. And after it came down to Razor and Davey Boy for the babyfaces, there was some real confusing shit going on the floor that I really didn't even track well at first. One of those rare times having Vince on commentary actually helped, because they had like 50 things going on here. They were doing split screens to show the previous two eliminations, and at the same time, Diesel was arguing with Shawn about something on the apron. And while that was happening, they have Davey Boy out on the floor fighting with Owen and Jarrett. Somehow during that melee, it was determined that Bulldog had been counted out, even though I had no idea he was even the legal guy, and I never saw the ref administering the 10 count. Way too much shit going on there. But that left Razor as the last remaining hope for the babyfaces. This is where I noted, Shawn is now sweating profusely after having done jack shit in the entire match. Literally, up to that point, his contributions to this match were yelling for Kevin Nash to do moves. Shawn was glistening at this point. I also love that irony. Diesel was outworking Shawn Michaels in 1994. Even at the point Shawn finally tagged in for the first time and then had Diesel restrain Razor to help him out. Diesel's like, fuck, dude, really? I've been in the ring nonstop for the past 8 minutes killing people. Can't I catch my breath? But of course, this match is primarily remembered for one big angle that took place. Also factoring in one of the all-time biggest bullshit finishes I've ever seen. One that makes Russo's booking look logical by comparison. Here's the entire final sequence. Shawn goes to hit Razor with the super kick, but he ducks. So Shawn connects with Diesel. And of course, as we've seen 2 previous times throughout 94, this is not the first time Shawn has accidentally clocked Diesel with the super kick. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Fool me 3 times, all right, fuck you, dude, it's on now. So Diesel's had enough, and he goes to chase Shawn up the aisleway, while all of the teammates try to hold him back. To no avail, because Diesel just ends up laying them all out. And remember when I was just talking about this being an all-time wretched finish? I didn't even realize how retarded it was until I actually wrote it down on paper. The finish to the opening Survivor Series pay-per-view match. All heels are counted out of the ring at the same time, resulting in Razor Ramon being declared the winner by forfeit. Not just Shawn Michaels, who at the time was the legal partner for the heels, but Diesel, Owen, the Anvil, and Double J were all counted out at the same time, even though they were all not the legal partners. So essentially, Razor wins the match via forfeit because all the heels are stupid and got themselves intentionally counted out trying to break up a fight on their own team. I have seen some radically dumb finishes in my day. This one right here, this might have taken the cake. How is that even a thing that can happen? How do you count out illegal partners in tag matches? How do you even have the sense to judge who the legal partner is in that case? Like, even if Shawn was the legal guy at the time, all right, yeah, ideally he would be eliminated from the match first. But every single one of the heels get punished as a result? just because they weren't standing on the fucking ring apron? They should have taken that referee to court. That is a bullshit call. Well, semi-joking aside, the split of Diesel and Shawn was vital story development, so that part made sense. And they've been teasing it on and off for months now, so finally we get the official payoff. Diesel is now full-fledged babyface. That feud is set in motion through the end of the year and well into Mania season as well. This is also the catalyst that launched the singles push for Diesel to the main event, as we'll see over the subsequent weeks. For good or bad, I mean, if you're trying to establish a new star, this is what you're supposed to do. The problem is it's Kevin Nash we're talking about, so the bar's pretty low to begin with. I mean, you all know what's coming down the pike with the Diesel main event run in the WWF. Ain't a whole lot of good to come out of it. But it all dates back to this one moment in history. Survivor Series 94. The night Diesel had enough of the Heartbreak Kid shenanigans. Keep in mind, too, these guys are still technically the tag team champions of the world. I don't even remember how they got the belts off of them. That'll be an interesting plot twist. What wasn't a plot twist was seeing Shawn be the first to grab his bags and get the fuck out of Dodge. Now, yes, he was running from Diesel in kayfabe. But, I think there was an underlying message somewhere in there. Translation, I got my paycheck and I'm out of here. Going back to the hotel for the night. Adios. Or maybe he was just trying to avoid getting any of the stain of Clowns R Us versus the royal family on him. And in that case, I don't blame Shawn for taking a powder. God. Well, we've come to it. The worst fucking match of all time. There's Jenna Maraska versus Charmel levels of all-time horrible matches. And then there's matches like this. It is certainly among the worst Survivor Series matches of all time. And after all these fucking weeks, after all the hideous television we've been subjected to, with having to hear the midget kings referred to as sleazy, queasy, and cheesy, now is the point where Vince McMahon asks the burning question, why would Lawler name his team sleazy, queasy, and cheesy? The best Gorilla Monsoon could come up with is, they all rhyme, Vince. You may as well have just said, I don't know, Vince. It was your stupid humor that came up with the idea for the program initially. Why don't you tell me? So as I anticipated, the match is beyond putrid. Every single bad, hokey comedy spot you could possibly think of, they pretty much did it all here. Cranked up to about 150 in terms of obnoxiousness. In addition to the hideous ring action going on, probably even more offensive than any of that, the match is never ending. Poor Lawler's out there having to work overtime to try to get something passable out of this. And bear in mind, they're not in the Northeast. This is San Antonio, Texas. Okay, yes, it is a WWE pay-per-view. even if you had a hand-select group of WWE fans in attendance, San Antonio is a traditionally pro wrestling market. There's a lot of territorial history in this city, which probably explains why the people were stone silent for the majority of this fucking fiasco. I mean, what do you say about it? The whole thing is sports entertainment turned up to the max. Just a giant cesspool of carny spots, one after the other. None of it's getting a reaction. And again, I echo my previous statement. This was not 5 minutes of bad WWF sports entertainment comedy. This was 16 goddamn minutes. Plus the afterbirth, which was equally unfunny and stupid. 16 minutes of this fucking shit. And it's all Jerry Lawler. I didn't even bother writing down anything that happened in the match, because it was exactly what I remember it being. Garbage. Bullshit. Vince's vision of pro wrestling come to light. God, is it horrible. And of course, what is the payoff? After the heels win and dispose of the clowns? Well, it's Lawler berating his own team for being a bunch of feckless geeks. The highlight of which was him saying, "I don't like short people anyway." That was at least a bit of dark humor I could get behind. But after Lawler gets chased around by the midgets, he runs up to the top of the ramp, only to get pied by Doink. Yes, that was Jerry's comeuppance. After 16 minutes of rotten fucking ring action and them totally killing the crowd, the payoff is Lawler getting pie-faced. I mean, at least he was smart enough to avoid having to bump or sell for the midgets. He at least knew not to shred his credibility to that extent. Fuck, this is awful, though. Telling you, man, every single bad thing that has ever been said about Clowns R Us versus the royal family, trust me when I say, it is validated. After having seen it again in real time 20-something years later, it still holds up as an all-time clunker. One of the worst matches in pay-per-view history. Most definitely one of the worst matches in 1994. And that's saying something too, because there have been a lot of bad ones. This makes that Yokozuna Undertaker casket match from the Royal Rumble look like fucking Owen and Brett at Mania. Kind of made me actually want to see Bull Nakano and Alundra Blaze for that women's title they aired in Japan. Think about that. The idea of me salivating to watch Alundra Blaze over the previous match we just witnessed. Thank Christ in heaven we had something good to follow it. One of the few redeeming highlights about this pay-per-view. It is the WWF Championship match between Bret Hart and Bob Backlund, where the only way to win is by having your corner man throw in the towel on your behalf. Someone should have reminded Vince about those stipulations before they rang the bell. But it is the battle of the finishing submission holds. Which hold is superior? Bret's sharpshooter or Backlund's chicken wing? God, it's crazy to think just how different this match was from the previous one. It's like we were watching an entirely different pay-per-view. Not even in the same universe. For everything that Lawler Doink fiasco wasn't, this match was. If Lawler and Doink was sports entertainment on the extreme end of the spectrum, This was pro wrestling on the extreme end. I mean, there's so much to say about this. It's hard to even really crystallize a general thought. I guess for starters, we could start here. This was about as old school wrestling gets. So if you're someone that doesn't like watching guys lay on the mat in holds for long periods of time, you probably wouldn't think all that highly of it. But because so much of the match is built around the drama and the story of the final 10 minutes, you can almost look past whatever boring aspects took place in the first 25. Because yes, if we are being fair and impartial here, it was by definition a very boring match. There's a lot of trading of holds back and forth. A lot of it was built around both guys laying in stationary positions for lengthy periods of time. If you didn't grow up watching stuff like this, or if you're not accustomed to seeing it all that often, I can understand it being very easy to zone in and out. I mean, trust me, there were points in this 30-plus minute match where I was getting a little fatigued and kind of waiting for a big spot to happen. But because I've seen this match and I kind of know it like the back of my hand, it's easy for me to overlook a lot of stuff. But even as I go back and see it again, here's the genius of it. The crowd was never taken out of it. Whenever they sensed the energy was dying out a little bit, they would shift gears and break out something new to get the crowd back into it. And because you had Owen and Davey Boy interacting on the floor, you had other stuff going on peripherally that you could draw your attention to whenever Backlund and Brett weren't really doing much of anything offensively. Like the point where Brett had Backlund in a figure four for like 5 minutes. They methodically keep the camera on Owen to kind of film his reaction. He's refusing to throw in the towel for Backlund. And meanwhile, Brett's screaming at Owen to do it. So like I said, you had stuff going on while they were milking the long submission attempts. But of course, when it comes to the actual talking points, it really does kind of center around that final 10 to 12 minute window. At the point Owen sees that Brett is about to put away Backlund with a sharpshooter, he runs some interference behind Hebner's back, while he was dealing with Davey Boy, obviously. And that leads to the spot where Bulldog is chasing Owen around ringside, and they do the inadvertent bump where Davey Boy collides with the ring steps and knocks himself out cold. And of course, I even remember watching this for the first time as a kid and just thinking, something smells so fishy here. Like, it's one thing for Bulldog to accidentally knock himself out and have to lay there unconscious for damn near 15 minutes. I can suspend my disbelief to a degree. But fucking Owen standing there immediately showing concern, now that the match has instantly turned in his favor all of a sudden. Like, come on now. Owen's too crafty. I always knew it was a setup. Didn't doubt it for a second. And again, going back to the subject of suspending disbelief, there is a lot of it you're going to have to apply when watching something like this. Even if you're a smarter fan and you've watched 20, 25, 30 plus years of this business, the idea of Bulldog laying there motionless on the ground for over 10 minutes, it's kind of ludicrous. Simply for smashing his head against the ring steps. But meanwhile, the more important subject matter, it's obviously Backlund putting Brett in the chicken wing clutch for almost an entire 10-minute time frame. And, well, because of the stipulations, the match can't end until somebody in Brett's corner throws in the towel for him. And because Bulldog's basically rendered dead, that leaves Stu and Helen Hart to be the saviors of the day. So Owen's out there begging and pleading with Stu and Helen at ringside for literally 10 fucking minutes to throw in the towel. And Well, if you've ever watched Stu and Helen's performances on these classic WWF shows from back in the day, they were not, how you say, convincing actors. Especially Helen. She had one singular facial expression, and it always read, "I'm trying to squeeze out a 4-day turd." That was about the extent of her emotions. Stu, I'm not even entirely convinced that man had emotions. So the whole thing's incredibly wacky on its face. Owen pretending to show concern while he's standing there crying and pleading with his parents. Again, it comes down to suspension of disbelief. They had an idea. It absolutely worked for the crowd. And while watching it back in hindsight leaves a lot to be desired, I still love this angle. I can look past the ridiculousness of Bret laying there in a fake chokehold for 10 minutes. I can look past the overacting of Owen and the underacting of Stu and Helen to milk the drama. I can look past Davey Boy having to take a power nap to sell the collision against the stairs. Because it's all worth it to see this finish, man. As finally Helen snags the towel from Owen. She throws it into the ring. Owen, not missing a beat, immediately grabs the towel, and he gets the fuck out of there. He bolted out of there faster than Shawn did running from Diesel in that opening segment. And at that point, the jig was up. I mean, everybody that thought Owen showed sympathy for Bret in that moment, they knew it was an act. And we get that great Owen promo afterwards where he's basically admonishing Bret and his parents, talking about how he fooled everybody. And while he's still the rightful king of the WWF, Bret is nothing more than a loser. God. Owen stole the show. This is the moment I determined. Anybody out there that tries to argue Bret is a superior brother, you can all kiss my skinny white ass. Owen was phenomenal in this. He took an angle that in modern wrestling probably would have gone to hell in a handbasket just because of the over-accentuating of the milking. But he made it work. And you know, this I think is where a lot of the common complaints about WWE's history of milking kind of holds water. The ones that say they overdo it, it's a detriment to the product. There's a time and a place to make the fans wait for something, to make them really crave that payoff. And then there's stuff like this where you see what the obvious game plan was. In hindsight, did it really need to take you 30 fucking minutes to get to the point? Why not 15? Like, do we really need to watch Bret lay there in a chokehold for 10 minutes in a split screen while Owen's crying and talking with his mom and dad? Could we maybe have not shaved off 6 minutes of that? All fair and objective opinions. But like I said, I still love this match. Maybe I'm a little biased because it came after that horrendous Doink versus Lawler match. But I still think it holds up. All these years later. It's just a shame that they have Backlund drop the strap to Diesel at a house show in MSG like 3 days later. Oh yeah, you forgot about that. Yeah. That was the thing. Bob Backlund's WWF title run amounted to a 3-day reign where he dropped the strap to Diesel in MSG in like, what was the record time? Something like 12 seconds. I know it was blink and you miss it short. I mean, by the time we review the next Retro Raw, I'm sure that'll be the first thing they cover. And I don't really know the ins and outs over why that decision was made. If Vince just didn't want a babyface Brett dropping the strap to the now babyface Diesel, if he thought that would have gone over like a fart in church, why they hot-shotted that title switch so quickly, I don't know. It was a very bizarre call. I've never really heard Brett talk about it, what he thought of the whole situation. Nash, same deal. Never really heard him speak about it. I don't even think I've heard Backlund talk about it in interviews. I don't know. But, well, obviously, if we keep following the timeline, the Brett Backlund program would carry over into next year, because that feud is still ongoing. They kept the tension going with Owen and Brett, even though, as I previously discussed on the channel, we never really got a fitting third match in that series. I mean, I think Owen and Brett wrestled like one more TV match in early 95 to settle the score, and that was pretty much all she wrote. Yeah, a lot of the fallout to this was very strange. But in terms of the actual match, still love going back and seeing it all these years later. It's one of Owen's greatest career-defining moments, among many of his great moments, in the year 1994 alone. So at that point, we were now halfway through the pay-per-view, while Gorilla and Vince were continuing to milk the Owen Hart angle. This is classic WWF. Vince goes, a lot of people still broken up over what Owen just did. So, of course, the first fan they pitched to in the crowd, what is she doing? She's waving at the camera and smiling. Beyond elated. Yeah. Definitely broken up over that Owen angle. So the next match on the card is the $1 Million Corporation versus Guts and Glory. The corporation led by DiBiase, which consists of Tatanka, Bam Bam, King Kong Bundy, and the Heavenly Bodies. And they're wrestling the team of Lex Luger, Adam Bomb, Mabel, and the Smoking Guns. For those curious, no. I have no clue how the Heavenly Bodies became a part of DiBiase's team. Apparently they just woke up the day of the pay-per-view and said, shit, we only have 3 members for the heel team. We need 2 more bodies. How about Dr. Tom and Jimmy Del Rey? They're bad guys. They'll fit right in. Well, I guess I shouldn't complain too much. If there's one thing this match desperately needed, it was competent workers. In fact, now that I'm looking at it, pretty much all the good workers were on the heel team, with jack shit to work with on the other side. So naturally, who do they eliminate first? The best worker of the bunch, Dr. Tom Pritchard. Can't make this shit up, folks. I'll tell you what, though, in all fairness, for the short time Mabel was actually in there working, he was not slacking off. I'd even go as far as to say he was the hardest working man on the babyface team. He took a nasty spill out to the floor right before getting counted out. They even showed it on replay. You just see Mabel giving Bam Bam a clothesline out to the floor. Mabel landing right on his tailbone with all his weight on the outside padding. Like nothing to cushion the blow. I mean, that dude hit hard. Thought he was dead. And they got Brian Clark out of there pretty quickly. Or, I guess we should go by his Christian name, Adam Bomb. And he got like nothing in offensively before getting eliminated by Bam Bam with a moonsault. I like how Vince had to constantly remind us that Lex Luger was the captain for Team Guts and Glory. It's like, that's something to be proud of. It's a pretty low bar, Vince. At some point, they eliminated Del Rey. I don't even remember how. There was an absolutely grotesque spot at one point that somehow did not end in utter catastrophe. I think it was Bart Gunn. He goes to give Tatanka a monkey flip out of the corner. I don't even know how this is humanly possible, but somehow Tatanka over-rotated on the flip. He came down landing right on top of his ankle, which at that point had folded up underneath his body. I don't know how that fucking guy didn't break it. It was right in front of the camera, too. I thought we were going to have a Sid Vicious moment right there where limbs would be dangling in every which direction. But no. No, he just got up and kept wrestling. And then, of course, less than a minute later, Tatanka and Bart royally fuck up a Samoan drop spot where Tatanka drops Bart right on top of his goddamn left shoulder. I did not mention this directly, but yeah, the smoking guns were absolutely appalling in this match. But I don't think that's anything revolutionary. They were always pretty terrible. Finally, the match boils down to Luger having to fight Bundy, Tatanka, and Bam Bam by himself. The heels spent about an hour working him over. And after all that, here's the finish they came up with. Luger catches Tatanka in a small package, and he pins him. Luger is then immediately laid out with a big splash from King Kong Bundy and pinned. Huh? You couldn't even let the guy make a fucking comeback? You just beat him flat after he pins Tatanka? This was the moment. This was where I determined Luger's career was dead in the water. Officially wasted. Ain't no coming back from this one. Sign those papers and get the fuck out of there, dude. WCW calleth. Then, of course, after Luger's pinned and defeated, the heels still have to beat him up until the rest of the geek babyfaces run down to fend the heels off. With Mabel obviously coming up the rear about 8 months too late, after all the damage had been done. Ugh. I don't know. I mean, it's like, the match itself was actually not that bad, all things considered. But I can't make sense of that finish for the life of me. It's not even like Luger had a chance to fight back. It was 99% him getting beaten down, a 1% quick flash pin on Tatanka where he had the momentum, and then immediately he's pinned like 3 seconds later. Like, if you're going to beat the guy, could you at least try to let him fight back for more than half a second? I mean, some of the work was okay here, but this is just kind of the reality of where we were in the WWF in 1994, man. These were considered their upper mid-card level guys. Both babyface and heel. I mean, you just look at the guys involved, and there's just not a lot of star power. A couple okay workers sprinkled in there, but on the whole, it was a total nothing match. Didn't do Luger any favors by being affiliated with it. The $1 Million Corporation continues to just kind of toil. I mean, it's not like this victory really elevated the group in any considerable way. Overall, just a very blah segment. What wasn't blah was Mr. Bob Backlund's promo. And this 45 seconds almost made up for the previous wasted 20-something minutes I just watched, where Backlund is here to provide some sports education. He says that he's been the unrecognized WWF champion since 1978. And for tonight, it's about him educating, pasteurizing, homogenizing, and some other kind of izing. Bottom line, he's here to give the people someone to emulate. And tonight, he feels like God. And it was a godly promo. Great performance from Backlund here. All those voice cracks. Sweating like a motherfucker. Just made it 1,000 times better. This man is a national treasure. Never forget that. And he's right. It's Mr. Bob Backlund, all you jabronis. I wish we could have had 20 more minutes of that. But instead we had the main event. Mercifully, we've come to it. It is the casket match between The Undertaker and Yokozuna. The rematch of sorts. And of course, the insurance policy here, to guarantee that we get a clean finish this time, without half the fucking roster getting involved, as we saw back at the Rumble the first time. The special guest referee / enforcer for the match, of all people, Chuck Norris. Because as we've said many times on this channel, Vince McMahon cannot get enough of his celebrity plugs. I mean, I guess you can argue, if there's one badass that can guarantee no outside interference or tomfoolery in a pro wrestling contest, you know, Chuck Norris is a pretty safe bet. And there are approximately 2 things I remember about this offhand. The finish, for one, and the angle with Chuck Norris, which I'll talk about when we get there. I will gleefully break that down. It is quite the moment. Beyond that, it is, quite frankly, one of the more unmemorable casket matches in WWF WWE history. And I say that as a die-hard Undertaker mark. We did have my favorite spot in all of wrestling. The blatant exploitation of how fake this sport actually is. As The Undertaker goes to Irish whip Yoko off the ropes, and because Yoko was running directly toward the casket, he just stops. He pumps the brakes. Defying all historical logic of rope running spots in pro wrestling. Yoko broke kayfabe. That was arguably one of the more notable spots in the match. The rest of it involved slow glacial moving offense and or Undertaker stalking Yoko around the ring. I also did note the great camera shot of Paul Bearer on the floor as he looks at his reflection in the urn and goes, "Oh, yes." That had to have been him going into business for himself. Taker did about 9,000 zombie sit-ups. I mean, the whole thing was essentially one giant smoke and mirrors angle. You had a bunch of interference from Master Fuji and Cornette on the floor, which completely defied all logic of having Chuck Norris out there to be a special guest enforcer when the fucking managers are just freely running around ringside causing distractions. It was funny, though. As Fuji grabs Taker's hair and he starts stalking Fuji around ringside, of course, we all know Fuji's not taking a bump. The guy's barely mobile. So Taker grabs him by the goozle pipe, and there's Cornette standing behind him with the racket. So Taker lets go, and he turns to look at Cornette. And Corny's first words, upon realizing this giant dead man is staring right through his soul, he goes, "Oh, Jesus!" And Taker gives him a throat chop. Corny takes the big bump. Sells it like he got knocked loopy. That was awesome. Again, the entire match is carried by the various angles. I mean, Taker literally couldn't do jack shit with Yoko physically. And, well, let's be blunt, too. Yoko was far from motivated at this point. I mean, he was just kind of going through the motions out there. They had about another 45 minutes of clubbing. I think it was at this point where Gorilla mentions that Yoko laying on the mat looks like a beached whale. Harsh. Factually accurate. Still harsh. And right as Taker's taking his good old time rolling Yoko's dead body toward the casket, this is where we get some Chuck Norris involvement. And by that, I mean him literally just standing there looking like a badass. Bundy and Bam Bam start making their way down to ringside. And of course, these two large men are no match for Chuck Norris's 1,000-yard stare. So they just kind of stand there for about 15 minutes while IRS runs in from the crowd to choke out Taker with a sleeper. And as he stuffs Taker into the casket, the officials are seen trying to get Bundy and Bam Bam away from the ring. Finally, Yoko realizes that all he has to do is slam the lid shut. But as he reaches through the ropes to pull the lid down, he gets grabbed by the throat. And then we get the greatest angle in the history of WWF in the mid-90s. As Double J comes down to try to confront Chuck Norris. And unlike his predecessors of Bundy and Bam Bam, who did not try to be confrontational with Norris because, well, they're not stupid, Jeff Jarrett, good old slapnuts himself, he decides, I'm going to fucking challenge this guy to a fight. He's smaller than me. What damage could he possibly do? So, of course, Chuck Norris gives Double J the thrust kick. Jarrett sells it perfectly, bounces on top of his head, and basically does a full bodily rotation. I laugh so hard. It is easily the best thing Jarrett's done in his entire career. Was bumping for Chuck Norris on a WWF pay-per-view. I mean, I watched it back on replay at least 10 times. Watching Jarrett oversell for this fucking super kick of doom. And finally, we get the actual finish. As Taker fires back on Yoko, plants him with a DDT, gives him a big boot to knock him inside the casket, and Taker slams the lid shut. He's declared the winner. And this is where I wrote down, this was 13 minutes of trudging, painful torture, followed by the final 2 minutes, which might have been the best thing I've seen in any WWF pay-per-view in all of 94. So, well, you can decide how good or bad it was based off that talking point alone. I don't have very fond memories of this match. The whole Yoko Taker feud in general. It was just, I don't know. It's not really remembered for being one of Taker's finer moments. I mean, it is very telling when you see them going to these extremes, though, with all the angles and the pomp and circumstance, just to try to get something passable out of Yokozuna at this point. It's sad. But it's the reality of where he was physically at this point. In one calendar year, he's barely mobile, can barely even move, much less work a full-length pay-per-view match. I mean, they got the people into it with the Chuck Norris spot, but man, it's just, I don't know. Again, it's just really kind of sad when you go back and watch it. And to think, too, Yoko's around for a couple more years. And his health decline only gets astronomically worse from here. I mean, you think it's bad now, dude. Wait until 96. Ugh. I shudder to even think. But again, it was just kind of a meh main event. Kind of like how most of the pay-per-view was meh. I mean, you take out the Bret Hart-Bob Backlund title match, I think this easily ranks among the worst Survivor Series pay-per-views of all time. Because it was pretty fucking bad. And really, even with that match, the whole thing is kind of carried by Owen's performance. Because, I mean, the actual match itself was really nothing to write home about. Was it as bad as I remember it being? Maybe not. Maybe it's cloudy judgment. I don't know. But that Clowns R Us Royal Family match, it still holds up as an all-time horrendous segment. Mostly in that it was just interminably long. Like, it's one thing to have stupid comedy that goes 5 minutes. You can get away with that here and there, but 16? Fuck you. But that is Survivor Series 94. And up next in our perilous journey through WWF Raw, we have Rumble season to look forward to in January. So make sure you keep the Retro Raw recaps on your radar so you can follow along in the time progression. We're moving the needle forward and seeing what true horrors await us in 95. Okay. So now that I'm entirely burnt out from the 2 previous recaps, I'm going to use my remaining energy to try to power through this NXT report. Not sure how it's going to go, but going to do my best. Should have turned on the heat too. My toes are frozen solid right now. Well, thankfully, with it being Thanksgiving week, there wasn't a whole lot going on with this taping. A lot of the main story was covered in the opening VTR, which kind of highlighted the Beat the Clock challenge from the other week. All to set up this week's main event, with Sami Zayn and Adrian Neville, the winner getting to face Bo Dallas for the NXT title on next week's show. I can honestly just skip over the remaining 40 minutes because, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot to harp on. The opener was Cesaro versus Yoshitatsu, which was a very weird segment. Okay, so they have Cesaro come down to the ring and immediately start bullying Byron Saxton. Why, I have no idea. Guess he didn't like his haircut or something. And while he's holding him by the lapel in the corner, keep in mind, by the way, Yoshitatsu is sitting like 10 feet behind Cesaro the entire time. He could easily just walk up and pop Cesaro in the mouth. That way Byron would at least have a chance to flee. But no. Instead, Tatsu just stands there like a piece of tree bark. That way, William Regal can then intervene. And he has to walk almost the entire length of the room just to get to ringside and pull Saxton from under the bottom rope. And of course, what is the payoff? Absolutely nothing. It's just a completely random heat angle they shot right before the opening bell. I mean, the only thing I could figure is this is where AEW got the idea for the BCC like 10 years later. It was all a decades-long story of that one moment on NXT television when Regal remembered that time Cesaro got physical with the ring announcer. And we did have Renee on commentary saying that Cesaro was all man. in a very provocative manner. I guess Plumber Moxley didn't hold a grudge. But that's still some BCC drama that's yet to be explored. By the way, all this speculation was much more intriguing than the actual match. I mean, Cesaro just overpowered and trounced this poor Tatsu fella, while he's also trying to intimidate William Regal at the booth and be a heel. Meanwhile, the crowd's chanting, "You are awesome." Yeah, very effective bad guy. And fast forward several moves, a big swing, and a one-arm neutralizer. Cesaro got the win while staring a hole through Regal. Did they actually do that match in WWE? I could have sworn Regal was long since retired by this point. But maybe I'm misremembering things. Maybe they actually did that match. Why in the fuck it was being teased on the developmental show, I'll never know. It was probably far more compelling than anything they were booking on the main roster at the time. But I guess we'll see where this story goes. That could have been a killer match on a Big Four pay-per-view if they actually were serious about establishing Cesaro as a top heel. But as we all know, they spent the better part of 10 years jerking that guy around. Constant stop and start pushes. Never really breaking through that imaginary glass ceiling, so to speak. I mean, you'd think a program like this should have been the textbook way to propel him past that point. What went wrong? I've been asking the same question about Juice Robinson's run with WWE. What the hell went wrong? Aside from the death gimmick they saddled him with. I'm trying to come up with an analogy here. It's like they took Mike Awesome's That 70s gimmick, Matt Riddle's personality, meshed them in a blender, and this is what came out on the other end. Fucking trash. Even poor Bo couldn't save this. He's in the back trying to do a promo on the main event with Sammy and Adrian. Picking who he thinks is going to go over. And of course, the guy's trying to be a snarky heel, saying that we're all winners because we're going to get to witness a great technical masterpiece. But neither of them are a match for Bo anyway, so it doesn't really matter who wins. And then, right in the middle of his promo, in typical WWE fashion, Juice just kind of casually runs into the camera shot. And of course, Bo and Devin have to stand there and pretend to be shocked when he allegedly pops up from out of the void. Meanwhile, he's reciting a bunch of overly scripted verbiage. It just sounds completely unnatural. No human being has ever uttered the words that Juice uttered in this fucking word salad promo. But he's trying to pretend to be stoned. Keywords trying and pretend. This is a word-for-word actual line this fucking guy recited on camera. Someone wrote this down on a sheet of paper and said, "Go say this." To Bo Dallas, he says, "I didn't realize I was harshing your mellow." And he said it with just about as much conviction as I did. I didn't realize I was harshing your mellow. And of course, Bo retaliates with the greatest statement on WWE television in the 2010s when he just totally buries this guy 10 feet under. And he goes, "I didn't realize you were still employed." Neither did anybody else, Bo. So Juice challenged Bo to a match later on, and Bo had to pretend to act all scared. He tried. But pretending to be afraid of Juice Robinson and rainbow pattern ring gear, kind of difficult to buy. And so you'll never guess what happened. Well, they do the match. It goes about 3 minutes and change. Renee Young actually said the words, "CJ Parker is one of my favorite superstars in all of WWE." With a straight face. I also realize I've been calling him Juice Robinson as opposed to CJ Parker. It's kind of easy to forget that. And, yeah, Bo beat him very convincingly with a bulldog. So thanks for coming, CJ. Back to the topic of horrible acting and exceedingly scripted verbiage. Paige and Emma were doing some of that in the interview station. Some may call it cutting a promo. I call it reciting lines for the opening night of the school play. And in fact, that might be an insult to high schoolers. Because I've been in the pit for school plays. I have seen more convincing acting than what Paige and Emma were attempting to do in this segment. Keep in mind, this is all pre-taped. They can do multiple takes. It still sucked. Now, I did dip out momentarily to take a piss, so I missed a good chunk of the pre-match angle they set up here with the Cassius Ohno-Tyler Breeze match. When I came back in the room, Rusev had already jumped Cassius in the aisleway and laid him out. I didn't even know about that until they showed it on the replay. I mean, I just saw Cassius down with a trainer hovering over him, and I assumed Rusev had already attacked him based on all the stuff they set up last week. And once they actually rang the bell to start the match, Cassius was still selling the rubber legs. So Breeze immediately hit him with a beauty shot and pinned him for the 3 count. More of an angle as opposed to an actual match. I'm also pretty sure they just 50-50'd another TV feud. Did we not just see Cassius beat Tyler on last week's show? 7 days later, they just turn around and give Breeze his win back. God, WWE booking is amazing. I mean, simple heat angle to build up the Rusev-Cassius feud. But, like, do we really need to see Tyler Breeze pin Cassius? Could we just not wave off the match? I don't know. It was what it was. Nothing much more to say about it. Then we had more cable access acting with the girls. This is all hideously wretched. I couldn't even watch the full thing without fast-forwarding. Bayley wants a tag match with Summer Rae and Sasha Banks. That's what I got out of it. I also noted just how tiny Bayley used to be before she bulked up years later. She was smaller than Sasha in this segment. And Sasha was never big to begin with. Guess it goes to show what a little bit of weight training in the gym can do for you. It all starts with the arms. And the rest kind of fleshes out over time. We also had Neville and Zayn having a chat before their match. The acting was slightly less phony than the girls' acting, but it was still pretty bad. They were half-heartedly trying to stir up tension, which mainly amounted to both of them arguing back and forth and going, yeah, you think you wanted more than me. Yeah, whatever, man. Fucking foul. I did note, though, When Neville's talking about how winning the NXT title guarantees them a main roster push, most notably getting the chance to main event WrestleMania, I wrote, well, it only took Sammy 10 years after the fact, but he did in fact eventually get to headline WrestleMania. So I guess Neville wasn't entirely off base. Now for him, the story was much different. I don't even remember if Neville got to work a WrestleMania before he got released. I mean, if he did, he certainly wasn't headlining. So then we had that long-awaited Ascension versus Hunico Camacho tag match. After approximately 1 week's build. And, oh yeah. Remember when I was talking about how much they went out of their way to protect the Ascension on this show? Giving them that Road Warrior smash-over treatment where they just kind of go out there and steamroll over tag teams in short matches? Well, here's something that went completely over my head. Remember when they had Hunico and Camacho get a clean, non-title televised win over the Ascension? In less than 3 minutes? Yeah. Neither do I. But that was a thing. The same duo that massacred Corey Graves and Adrian Neville on 2 straight occasions. Here they are doing a job to Hunico and Camacho in the middle of a random NXT episode in 2013. And this comes after the Ascension spent the bulk of the match killing these guys. They had the match firmly in their control. And at the very end, one of the Ascension guys knocks Camacho out to the floor. And then the other does a head palm shoot off to Hunico, who immediately comes off and catches the guy with a small package for the 3 count. Right, because, I mean, you all remember that time Hawk got rolled up in a cradle by the Italian Stallion, right? After they already smashed through the entire fucking roster. Just 1 week in a random televised match. They had a job guy go out there and beat the Road Warriors using a flash pin. Oh, wait a minute, what's that? That never happened? You don't say. I'm being a smartass, but Hunico and Camacho were back for what? A week? We had never seen these guys on the show before. Now they're just beating the tag team champions clean in 3-minute matches. Just like that. After they were selling for quite literally the entire fucking match. I don't know. Questionable. I mean, it's one thing to build up a new babyface team. Thinking they went from 0 to 100 a little quick here. I seem to recall them never beating the Ascension on NXT television. I thought it's when they got called up to the main roster where they started getting buried pretty consistently. Then again, that's why it's good to go back and relive these classic shows. Just to see how much history was truly forgotten about during this period in the business. Trust me, there was plenty of it. If there's one thing that definitely describes the WWE in the 2010s, forgettable, probably the most apropos term. But that takes us to our TV main event. The number 1 contenders match between Adrian Neville and Sami Zayn. With Bo Dallas on commentary, who spent the majority of the match flirting with Renee. Not entirely sure what to make of that. Nor was I sure of what to make of Bo referring to Sami and Adrian as kids. He kept doing that throughout the entire match. He kept calling them kids. How old was Bo at this time? Hold on, now I'm curious. Let's see. Pull up Google here. He was born in 1990. Right now he is 33 years old. So that would have meant he was 23 when this program aired. Yeah, I guarantee you Sammy was way older. Same with Neville. Anyway, they definitely played up the history between these two. Talking about how they wrestled each other in the UK as far back as 2006. So they weren't strangers in the ring together. If it was 2006, then Sammy probably would have been wrestling as El Generico. And, well, for what it's worth, good or bad, depending on how you view it, this was definitely more in the ballpark of what I would expect to see out of an El Generico match on the indie circuit. They basically went out there and had themselves a good old-fashioned flips and stunts match. With WWE handcuffs, of course. Because the company obviously wasn't going to let them go out there and expose the business. If I had to properly term it, I would say this was a Ring of Honor circa 2008 or 2009 match where, yes, they were doing a lot of high-risk moves and big flashy things. At the same time, it wasn't a total outlaw indie match. Like something you would expect to see in a PWG where it's just nonstop high-flying moves for 15 minutes and nobody sells a goddamn thing. You know, they were at least attempting to work a story here. It was a babyface match for one. So they worked it as an athletic contest where they were going out there to try to show the other guy up. It was pretty back and forth for the most part. We had the typical big dive spot before the commercial, which is kind of a holdover we see in today's product a lot of the time. I've never been the biggest fan of the dive spot, which leads to the commercial pitch. Like right when the crowd is the hottest they've ever been during the whole match. Then you come back and they're working each other over on the mat in holds. And the crowd's deader than a doormat. Again, I talked about the commentary banter between Renee and Bo. It was very strange. At one point, Renee complimented Bo's ponytail in a very flirtatious manner. It's at that point where I kept wondering, is Renee supposed to be a babyface or a heel commentator? Because with the way she flips between favoring the good guys and the bad guys on this show, God, you think she was on her period or something. She's so bipolar. Of course, they kicked up the action toward the end there once they broke out all the near falls. I will say one thing. You look at a guy like Sammy standing next to Adrian. You can tell which guy clearly hits the gym more frequently. But goddamn, you'd never be able to guess just how strong Sammy actually is. When he caught Neville during that running spot and basically deadlifted him into a blue thunderbomb position, I was like, Christ, I forgot how strong that fucking guy actually is. And again, they were getting a little excessive with all the flashy ooh-ah moves at the very end. But it worked for the crowd. And it didn't get completely absurd to where they were breaking out fucking poison ranas and all that goofy indie shit you see guys do today. But it all led to the spot where Sammy's fighting with Neville on the top rope. And Neville caught him with a headbutt. So he sets up Sammy for the red arrow and gets the 3 count. And even though the fans were super pro Sammy here, him losing didn't hurt Neville any, just because they were kind of split down the middle here in terms of who they were cheering for. So the finish actually got over. And of course, they had the friendly little embrace afterwards, so they were still on good terms. And again, this sets up Neville and Dallas for next week. No post-match angles or anything. Just a simple stare down. Kind of establishing Neville as a new top babyface. And I do know that he and Bo have several encounters before they do the actual title switch in early 2014. So with them already going to the well with doing their first match on TV next week, I mean, this feud apparently goes on longer than I initially thought. Again, I always talk about how much of a fan I was of Pac during this period. I had seen some of his indie work prior to when he signed with WWE, but I didn't know too much about him. I just wish AEW would have taken the same approach WWE did. Instead of making him a fucking lackey for the Lucha Brothers, burying him in the trios division where the guy was never going to stand out on his own. And they should have been doing shit like this with him from the very beginning. I'd have bought Pac versus guys like Cody or Jericho or Punk. The guy at least looks like a fucking athlete. He's not Wardlow or Powerhouse Hobbs in terms of a guy with size, but again, if AEW would have treated him as a top single star and kept pushing him as such, Pac could have been somebody. He's got a look. He's somebody you can take seriously as a badass. But we said that about how many countless others on that roster that Tony's buried and booked into oblivion. So anyway, we'll talk about that match next week. All in all, the show wasn't a complete one-note program. Claudio teasing the feud with Regal is interesting. Again, why they wouldn't promote something like that on the main roster is beyond me. Lo and behold, that's WWE in the mid-2010s for you. Elsewise, a lot of the story content this week was just kind of placeholder stuff from the previous show. Rusev and Cassius is still being teased. Bayley's feud with the BFFs is still ongoing. Whatever the issue is with Emma and Paige's melodrama. And those two have been beefing for like 8 months now, and I still don't know who the face is and who the heel is. Nor do I really care. I never thought either of those girls were really good, but for whatever reason, the internet fans love those two. I have no idea why. But I don't really know where they go with Sammy from this point. I know they eventually reinsert him into the title equation, but, while Neville and Dallas are preoccupied with their feud, I guess Sammy's going to be off kind of waiting his turn in line. So we'll see what they have dealt for him later on. There's definitely stuff happening on the show right now. Not all of it is very appealing to me, but you know what? Credit where it's due. At least they're fucking trying. And that's more than I can say for modern WWE programming a lot of the time. Where you watch SmackDown and you think, all right, Bloodline segments are over. Can we tune out everything else? And most of the time, people do. And with that wraps up this very exciting show. A lot of content we addressed today. But, I think we did enough damage for this one. So, with that, I guess you could say we'll be back on Friday for a Status Quo Classic Review Series edition. Starrcade 87 is in the books. Survivor Series 1994 is in the books. Survivor Series 2023 is in the books. And now we can proceed with the shows as such. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, comment, like the show, and catch you guys soon. Thanks for stopping by. Take care. Peace.